All right, so just a couple days ago, I pulled a box of ball python eggs out of the incubator, and 2 snakes were actually completely out of the eggs. Those were bamboo combos, and 5 other eggs weren't actually all the way out. We were cutting them open, looking inside, kind of seeing what we got, and it looked like, to my amazement, that we had 5 pastels, which is pretty incredible. And I had another bamboo that I know for sure was pastel. Maybe the last one was, I was kind of on the fence if it was pastel. And the interesting thing is that I bred Bobby here. He's my bamboo ball python. I bred him to just a straight pastel. It wasn't a super pastel, so you'd expect on average 50% pastels in that clutch, and it looks like we almost got 100%. So I want to show you that female first, and we'll see what you think. If it's a super pastel, I can almost guarantee you super pastels look completely different. This looks like just a straight pastel. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull those eggs out of the incubator, and it looked like, I was just kind of peeking in there, it looks like all those pastels have come out of the eggs. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to check them out, and we'll kind of go through them one by one, look at them individually, and set them up in the hatchling rack. All right, so this girl is the female of that clutch. She's just a straight pastel, and if you look kind of at her head, she's kind of running away now. I've been kind of messing with her a little bit, but if you look at her head, she definitely doesn't have the faded head of a super pastel. Usually super pastel has a lot of blushing up on the head, and this girl, as far as I can tell, she's just a straight pastel, nothing fancy about it. And you can see the pastels kind of fade out a little bit as they get bigger, and they're really pretty intense as when they're smaller, and when they get big they kind of brown out just a little bit, but they still really hold their color. And the other thing about a pastel is you'll see the patterns a little bit more broken up than a regular normal. You won't have the alien heads as much on the sides, and you'll have kind of highlighting up here on the top. So as far as I can tell, she just looks like a regular pastel. All right, so here is the box fresh out of the incubator, and I'm going to check these guys out and see if they're all out of the egg. And let's take a look, and wow, they look like they're all out of the eggs, which is a good thing. See if we can move all these empty eggshells to the side. And let's see what we have here. Quite a few snakes in here. And the interesting thing is, when I was first peeking in there, they all kind of looked like pastels, but now that I'm looking at the box, I'm starting to think maybe these aren't all pastels. As a matter of fact, some of them are looking quite a bit different than the other ones. Let's take a look at this one. This one, I would say this one over here, this looks like a pastel for sure. Take a look at this one. So this one really has a busy pattern, and it's really bright yellow. It has these highlights up in here. This is a really good looking pastel. It has a lighter head, which is really interesting. That is a good looking pastel right there. If we look at the belly's pretty clear on this one. It has a little bit going on with the navel, which is kind of normal for something like this just coming out of the egg. You have to really be careful of the navel. Sometimes they can have some big, huge navel problems that you want to watch out for, but these look like they're okay. So then if you take this one and compare it to, for example, this one, take a look at this. This is, I would say this one could be actually a normal ball python. If you look at the difference, that compared to this one, yeah, it kind of took me in the egg, because I actually have some in the hatchling rack that are a lot darker than this, and then when I was opening these up, they all looked yellow. As a matter of fact, let me grab that one from my hatchling rack and just show you the difference. Let me take a look at this here. Let's see, I have one over here. Yeah, if I can get them out. So take a look at this one. This is kind of what I was expecting as far as a normal ball python. If you take a look at any of these compared to this one, you can see that they almost look like they're a lot lighter and yellower pattern's kind of broke up a little bit. I don't know. It's so hard to tell on these until they mature a little bit. But I would say, boy, it's really hard to tell. So take a look at this. This is like the pastel compared to a normal. This is kind of what I would expect, kind of the difference. But if you compare these other ones side by side, this one still has some highlights. Boy, this is always the hard part, kind of, you know, trying to figure out what you have. What do I have here as far as pastels and not pastels? And if you can kind of compare it to this one, it's pretty incredible. This one's actually het pied, so you can see there's a little bit of white coming up on the belly. It's definitely a darker snake compared to these, which is really interesting. So I'd say this one for sure, with the lighter head, is definitely a pastel. It looks like this one is definitely a runt. Look at how skinny this one is. Super skinny. That is super skinny. And you compare that to, look at that one compared to this one, how beefy this one is compared to the skinny one. It's really a huge difference between these two. Pretty incredible. So let's see. So if I was to figure out which one was pastel, I would say this one's pastel. This one, I don't know. This one kind of has the highlights right up in here. And that could be an indicator that it's pastel. This one has a little bit lighter of a head. I'd say maybe those two are pastel. And then this one's looking pretty normal. It doesn't really have the highlights in the black here. It has a darker head. I'd say this one's probably a normal. I would say this one's probably a normal, and I would say this runt is probably a normal. So I was actually wrong. I thought these were all pastels, and I was basically basing it off of the color of this being so dark. Just look at how dark that is compared to these guys. So it looks like, to me, it looks like we have 2 pastels and 3 normals. That's what I'm going to go with. Alright, so here are the 2 bamboos that I have from that clutch, and it looks like they both shed out, actually. And the interesting thing is, now that they've shed out, to me it looks like these are really both pastel bamboos. I don't know if you've actually seen like a straight bamboo, but usually the straight bamboo doesn't have as light of a head as these guys. Now the heads are almost looking almost exactly the same, and they're kind of faded out. It's really, let me tell you, it's really hard to tell with hatchlings until they shed a few times and get a little bit of weight on them, and you actually compare them to like a straight bamboo. Usually a straight bamboo is a lot more intense than these guys. These guys seem to be quite a bit faded out, and as we hatch out some more bamboos, we can definitely compare them side by side. I know it kind of looks a little bit different on camera, and sometimes, you know, looking back at some of these videos, it looks like it's almost easier to tell on the camera the difference between them than it is in real life, which is kind of weird. I think the camera has maybe a little bit more contrast, so you're probably looking at this thinking, man, it's really obvious, but here under this light, you know, in real life, it can be a little bit challenging, and you really can't tell a lot of these right off the bat until they shed a little bit. As a matter of fact, if you look at some of these bamboos, if you look at like a pastel bamboo compared to a regular bamboo side by side as a hatchling, there is very little difference. And as the pastel bamboo matures, it gets yellower and yellower. And as a matter of fact, when I sold my yearling bamboo pastels at this last show, they were really yellow. I couldn't believe how bright the yellow just really pops out as yearlings. And after a couple sheds, it's really obvious. And I'm thinking by the differences in the heads, you compare the heads on these and you compare it to a regular bamboo, I'm pretty sure that these are both pastel bamboos. All right, so let me show you what I have going on in my hatchling rack over here. I have quite a few starting to build up here. Pretty much all my females have laid eggs, all except one. This is the new stuff coming out. These 4 snakes right here have already eaten 3 meals. This is like my fire. I crossed a fire pied visual with a normal. I got some really cool fires, 100% het pieds. That's what these are. Really good looking snakes. And then I have a normal here. This one ate 3 meals already. And when I feed them the mice, I feed live mice, essentially what I do is I dump out the water, fill it with substrate so my mice don't drown in here. And this is what the normals look like. This is from a different clutch. This is the dark normal I was comparing before. This is the pastel that we just set up in here. And you can definitely tell the difference between the pastel and the fire. You can see the pattern is definitely lighter and more jumbled up. It's really bright and intense. That is a good looking snake. That's definitely a pastel. And then this pastel bamboo, 99% sure these are pastel bamboos. And really, you really aren't really 100% sure until they shed out and they start really changing. And especially if you get some straight bamboos, you can definitely tell the difference after like a couple sheds or a couple meals. But I would say these are 99.9% sure these are both pastel bamboos, which is really cool. And then this is the new normal that I hatched out. Let's take a look at this under this light up here. So this is essentially where they're living up here in this rack. It's definitely a lighter, brighter normal than my other normals. That's kind of what fooled me into thinking these were pastels because they're really bright. And keep in mind there is quite a bit of variability in different lines of the wild type normals. So a lot of times it can kind of trick you into thinking there's actually something in there where it's just really another normal. Some normals will kind of fool you. You think there's something else in there, but it doesn't really breed true. All right, so one more thing I want to show you is I want to show you this last female ball python that's going to lay eggs. And she should lay, I'm thinking, probably lay eggs any day now. I've been checking her twice a day. I almost opened this up and I thought she actually was on a pile of eggs. She's usually when they start, building up like that and coiling into kind of a ball like that, it looks like she's going to lay any day now. So I've been actually checking on this girl twice a day. This is my Lemon Blast, so it's a pastel pinstripe. I actually paired it with my pastel Desert Ghost male. So from this, I'm hoping the crown jewel will be a Super Blast Het Desert Ghost. So what it is it's a super pastel pinstripe 100% Het Desert Ghost because we bred it with the Desert Ghost. And if I hit that combo, I'm definitely going to save at least one of those babies, so I can work some of this other stuff into my Desert Ghost projects, which would be pretty cool. Desert Ghost is pretty powerful, especially when you start adding the pastel into it. And it doesn't really matter if I get a male or a female. I think either one I'll probably save, the crown jewel for future breeding. All right, so there you have it. It looks like I made quite a few mistakes on the identification of the pastels. Looks like they're not all pastels. As a matter of fact, if you wait just a few weeks, you can definitely tell. Usually like the straight bamboos will get really intense. The pastel bamboos will fade out. The normals will kind of turn darker. Pastels will really brighten up. It just really takes a few weeks to dial in the IDs. And last year, essentially what I did is I went through as soon as they came out of the egg, I was using the metal probe up in the tail pocket of the snakes, trying to figure out the males and the females. If it goes in really deep, it's a male. If it doesn't go in very far, it's a female. Last year, I'd say I probably got half of them wrong coming right out of the egg. This year I didn't even probe them because I know it takes like 2 to 3 weeks before they're really ready to be probed, and you can tell the males and females apart at that point. So that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.